On his way to his wedding, a millionaire sees a homeless woman with twins in the rain and gives her the keys to his house. When he returns, what he finds leaves him in shock. The reflection in the mirror stared back at Paul with empty eyes. His hands, skilled at closing multi-million-dollar deals, trembled as he tried to knot his silk tie. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed through the vast, immaculate bedroom, reminding him that every second brought him closer to a commitment that was supposed to be the pinnacle of his life. Paul sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the custom-tailored suit. His gaze wandered around the room, landing on expensive objects that suddenly felt distant and cold. A silver picture frame on the dresser caught his eye. In it, a photo of him and Anne, his fiancée, smiled artificially at the camera. Paul walked over to the photo, his fingers tracing the outline of Anne's face. Beautiful, elegant, the perfect partner in society's eyes. Yet the emptiness in his chest persisted. Turning around, Paul surveyed the expanse of his master suite. The pristine king-size bed never truly shared, the closet full of identical suits, a wall of uniformity that reflected the monotony of his days. On the nightstand, a stack of business magazines and a bottle of sleeping pills silently told the story of his lonely nights. A slight cough at the door interrupted his thoughts. "The car is ready, sir," announced the driver, his neutral voice echoing in the silence of the room. Paul nodded mechanically, grabbed his jacket, and took one last look in the mirror. The man who looked back seemed like a stranger, trapped in a life he no longer recognized as his own. The descent to the garage was a blur. Paul got into the luxury car, the soft leather of the back seat embracing him like an old friend who knew all his secrets. As the driver started the engine, Paul closed his eyes, letting the memories of the past few months flood his mind. The marriage proposal at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, the headlines in the papers announcing the union of two business empires, the endless meetings with the wedding planner to discuss details Paul barely registered. It all felt like part of a predetermined script, each step leading him deeper into a role he wasn't sure he wanted to play. Raindrops began to patter on the car roof, as though the sky shared Paul's melancholy. He opened his eyes, watching the city pass by through the window. The streets, usually bustling, seemed deserted under the grey veil of the approaching storm. That was when he saw her. On the corner of a side street, a lone figure huddled under a worn-out awning. A young woman, her arms cradling a bundle against her chest. When the car slowed at the traffic light, Paul glimpsed not one but two small faces peeking out from the soaked blanket. Time seemed to freeze. Paul's eyes, once empty, were now fixed on the scene before him. The woman, no more than a girl really, lifted her gaze, meeting his through the car window. In that fleeting moment, Paul saw a reflection of himself. The same despair, the same loneliness, but also a spark of something he had lost long ago. Hope. Without thinking, his hand moved to the button that lowered the window. The rush of cold, damp air that swept into the car seemed to awaken him from a long trance. "Stop the car," Paul ordered, his voice rough with emotion. The driver, surprised, complied, parking a few yards from the corner. Paul hurried out, ignoring the rain that now soaked his once impeccable suit. He approached the young woman, who watched him with a mix of fear and curiosity. Up close, Paul could see the dark circles under her eyes, the bluish tremble of her cold lips. The identical twins in her arms let out a small moan in unison. Paul felt something break inside him. Without a word, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. His fingers brushed against the velvety box containing the wedding rings, passing over it to grab a set of keys. In a decisive gesture, he held out the keys to the young mother. She looked at him, confused, her eyes wide with disbelief. 28 Oak Street, Paul murmured, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar of the rain. "It's yours now." Before she could respond, Paul turned and walked back to the car, each step echoing like thunder in his ears. As he got in, he took one last look back. The young woman was still there, the keys shining in her trembling hand, an expression of astonishment on her face. "To the church," Paul instructed the driver, his voice firm despite the storm raging in his chest. As the car picked up speed, Paul looked at his now empty hands. The keys to his mansion, his solitary refuge, were in the hands of a stranger. And for the first time in years, he felt the weight of loneliness lift, replaced by something new and terrifying, something that felt like purpose. The car continued on its way through the rainy city, taking Paul toward a future that suddenly seemed as uncertain as it was promising. The church awaited him. Anne was waiting, but Paul's mind was elsewhere. On that corner he'd left behind, where 3 lives had changed with a simple gesture. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets and perhaps offering a fresh start for everyone involved in that extraordinary morning. The rain fell mercilessly, drenching Marie to the bone. She clutched the twins against her chest, trying to shield them from the cold with her own trembling body. The raindrops mixed with the tears on her face as she stared at the keys in her hand, such a simple object, yet one that now represented a decision that could change her life forever. The man in the expensive suit had left as quickly as he appeared, leaving Marie stunned. She couldn't believe what had just happened. A stranger, a millionaire on his way to his own wedding, had handed her the keys to his house. It was too surreal to be true. Marie closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the keys in her palm. Her mind wandered back to a time when she had a roof over her head and dreams for the future. 5 years ago, Marie was a young woman full of hope. She worked as an assistant teacher in an elementary school and was about to graduate from college. Then she met David. Tall, charming, and seemingly kind, he won her over with his easy smile and promises of eternal love. In the beginning, everything was perfect. David showered her with attention and gifts, making her feel like the most special woman in the world. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. First, there were subtle comments about her clothes, then about her friends. Marie, in love and naive, didn't notice she was being isolated. David's controlling behavior became more obvious when Marie got pregnant. He insisted she leave her job, claiming she needed to take care of her health. Reluctant but wanting to please him, she agreed. It was the beginning of the end of her independence. Months went by, and David's behavior became increasingly erratic. Outbursts of anger alternated with periods of remorse and promises to change. Marie, now pregnant with twins and completely dependent on David, felt trapped with no way out. The final straw came when the babies were born. David, unable to handle the responsibilities of fatherhood and frustrated by the changes in his life, became violent. One night, after a particularly heated argument, he raised his hand against Marie. In that moment, looking into the frightened eyes of her newborn children, she knew she had to run. With only a bag of clothes and her precious babies, Marie escaped in the middle of the night. With no money and no family to turn to, she found herself on the streets, struggling day by day to keep her children fed and safe. The sound of thunder brought Marie back to the present. She looked at the twins, now 6 months old, huddled against her chest. Their faces were pale from the cold, and she could feel their small bodies trembling. "What should I do?" Marie whispered to herself, her voice almost lost in the noise of the rain. The stranger's offer was tempting, but years of distrust and fear made her hesitate. What if it was a trap? What if he came back and demanded something in return? Worse yet, what if he turned out to be like David? But then one of the babies coughed, a weak and painful sound that broke Marie's heart. She looked again at the keys in her hand. It wasn't just about her now. She had 2 innocent lives to protect, 2 children who deserved more than a life on the streets. With a deep sigh, Marie made her decision. Regardless of the risks, she couldn't let her children spend another night in the rain. Gripping the keys tightly, she stood, adjusting the babies in her arms. "Come on, my loves," she murmured softly. "Mommy's going to take us someplace dry." The journey to the mansion felt endless. Exhausted and soaked, Marie followed the directions the stranger had given. With each step, she questioned her decision, but the weight of the twins in her arms pushed her on. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Marie saw the mansion rising before her. It was an imposing sight, with large windows and an elegant facade. For a moment, Marie froze, feeling completely out of place. With trembling hands, she inserted the key into the lock. As she turned it, she heard the click of the mechanism. Hesitant, Marie pushed the door, which opened silently. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Marie took a few tentative steps, her eyes wide at the luxury around her. Plush carpets, elegant furniture, artwork on the walls. It was a world completely unlike her own. The twins, sensing the change in environment, began to stir. Marie soothed them gently, her own eyes brimming with tears of relief and disbelief. "It's all right, my loves," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're safe now." As she cautiously explored the house, Marie couldn't shake the mix of gratitude and apprehension she felt. This place was a refuge, a chance to start over, but it was also unknown and intimidating. Finding a bedroom on the ground floor, Marie carefully laid the twins on a large, soft bed. For the first time in months, they could sleep comfortably, sheltered from the cold and rain. Sitting at the edge of the bed, watching her children sleep peacefully, Marie allowed herself a moment of hope. She didn't know what the future held or how long this situation would last. But in that instant, that night, they were safe and dry. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, thinking of the stranger who had changed their lives with one impulsive act of kindness. "Whoever you are, thank you." With a deep sigh, Marie lay down on the bed, allowing herself to relax for the first time in a long while. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, she let herself rest, lulled by the soft sound of her children's breathing and the promise of a new beginning. The sound of church bells echoed through the city, announcing a union that was about not to happen. Paul, drenched and out of breath, ran up the marble steps 2 at a time, his heart pounding as loudly as the bells above. He paused for a moment in front of the massive wooden doors, trying to catch his breath and compose himself. Inside the church, the guests' chatter faded into tense silence when the doors opened. All eyes turned to Paul, who entered with hesitant steps. His expensive suit, now wrinkled and wet, stood in stark contrast to the immaculate elegance of the church's decor. Anne, radiant in her wedding gown, watched Paul with a mix of relief and concern. Her perfectly made-up eyes couldn't hide the confusion at the sight of her fiancé in such a disheveled state. As Paul walked down the aisle, she noticed something in his eyes, an expression she'd never seen before, a mix of fear and liberation. The priest cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention back to the ceremony. "We are gathered here today," he began, his voice echoing through the church walls. Paul stood beside Anne, but his mind was miles away. The priest's words seemed distant and muffled, as if spoken underwater. Instead, all Paul could hear was the echo of rain and the distant cries of the twins he had left behind. Anne took his hand, momentarily pulling him back to reality. She smiled at him, a practiced, perfect smile, the kind that graced magazine covers and TV commercials. Paul tried to smile back, but his lips barely moved. As the ceremony went on, Paul's unease grew. He looked at the guests, powerful executives, influential politicians, celebrities, all there to witness the merger of 2 business empires. That was what his wedding meant to the world, a union, a transaction. The time for the vows arrived, and Anne turned to Paul, her eyes shining with expectation. She began reciting carefully rehearsed words, promises of eternal love and devotion that sounded more like contract clauses than heartfelt declarations. Then it happened. While Anne spoke, Paul had an epiphany. Scenes from that morning flooded his mind. The rain, the desperate young mother, the cold, trembling babies. He saw the fear in her eyes when he approached, then the spark of hope when he handed her the keys. In that brief moment, he had felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine compassion, the desire to help without expecting anything in return. "Paul?" Anne's voice pulled him back to the present. It was his turn to speak his vows. Paul opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at Anne, then at the priest, then at the expectant guests. The silence in the church was deafening. He began, his voice trembling. "I can't do this." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Anne froze, her perfect smile faltering for the first time. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice barely masking her panic. Paul released her hands and took a step back. "I'm sorry, Anne, but I can't marry you." The shock was immediate. Guests gasped, some rose from their seats. Anne turned pale, tears of rage and humiliation welling in her eyes. "Have you lost your mind?" she hissed, grabbing Paul's arm. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Paul gently pulled free from her grip. He turned to face the guests, feeling an odd sense of calm wash over him. "I apologize to all of you for coming here," he said, his voice growing stronger. "But I realized something today. Love, real love, is not about contracts or mergers. It's not about how much money we can accumulate or the image we project to the world." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the stunned crowd. "Love is about compassion. It's about caring for someone more than you care for yourself. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or scary." Anne took a step forward, tears streaming freely down her face. "Paul, please, don't do this. Think about what we're throwing away." Paul turned to her, his gaze soft but resolute. "Anne, we both deserve more than this. We deserve a chance to find real love, not just a business partnership disguised as marriage." A growing murmur filled the church. Camera flashes erupted, capturing the moment as one of the year's most anticipated weddings fell apart before everyone's eyes. Paul began walking back down the aisle, ignoring the shocked stares and frantic whispers. When he reached the church doors, he turned one last time. "I hope all of you get to feel what I felt today," he said, a genuine smile forming on his lips. The joy of doing something purely out of kindness, expecting nothing in return. Because that's where we find the true meaning of love. With those words, Paul pushed open the doors and stepped out into the still falling rain. For the first time in years, he felt truly free. Inside the church, chaos erupted. Anne fell to her knees, sobbing in her designer wedding gown. The guests stood, some rushing to console the abandoned bride, others hurrying to make calls, eager to be the first to spread the news of the scandal. But Paul heard none of it. He walked through the wet streets, the rain washing away the last vestiges of his old life. His thoughts focused on only one thing, the mansion where he had left a young mother and her children. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he was eager to find out. Dawn brought a weak light filtering through the mansion's large windows, revealing a world that looked like it was straight out of a dream. Marie woke up disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The soft touch of silk sheets and the near-absolute silence were as strange as they were welcome. Next to her, the twins, Liam and Zoe, slept peacefully, their tiny faces relaxed for the first time in months. Marie watched them for a moment, her heart overflowing with love and a renewed sense of determination. This place, surreal as it seemed, was an opportunity she couldn't waste. Carefully, so as not to wake the babies, Marie got up and began exploring the mansion. Every step on the plush carpets, every touch of the finely crafted furniture reminded her of how far she was from her previous reality. The hallways seemed to stretch on forever, leading to room after impressive room. The kitchen, with its state-of-the-art appliances and marble countertops, made Marie gasp. She opened the fridge, surprised to find it well stocked. The thought of preparing a decent meal for herself and the babies, after surviving on so little for so long, nearly brought her to tears. Returning to the bedroom, Marie found the twins awake, cooing softly. "Good morning, my loves," she whispered, picking them up. "How about we explore our new house?" Carrying the babies, Marie once again walked through the rooms, this time seeing them through Liam and Zoe's curious eyes. She pulled back the heavy drapes, letting sunshine flood the rooms and revealing the layer of dust covering furniture and objects. "Looks like we have some work to do, right?" Marie smiled at the twins, who replied with delighted giggles. Determined to repay the stranger's generosity, Marie decided to start cleaning and organizing the mansion. Creating a makeshift playpen for the babies with cushions in the living room, she began her task. The hours passed quickly as Marie threw herself into the work. She dusted, swept and tidied, moving from room to room with an energy she hadn't felt in months. The sounds of her activity mixed with the baby's occasional babbling and laughter, forming a symphony of life echoing through halls once silent. As she cleaned, Marie began noticing small details about the owner of the house. Framed photos showed a successful businessman, always impeccably dressed, but with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Books on finance and business strategy dominated the shelves, with only a few classic novels hidden among them. Looks like our benefactor needed a little more joy in his life, Marie murmured, running her fingers over a particularly lonely-looking photo of the man in a grand office. By noon, Marie paused to feed the twins and fix something for herself. Seated at the kitchen table, with Liam and Zoe in improvised high chairs beside her, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The mansion, which had felt like a cold museum earlier that morning, already seemed more welcoming. After lunch, Marie pressed on with her mission. She opened windows to let in the fresh spring air, rearranged furniture to create cozier spaces, and even added personal touches here and there. Her colorful throw she carried in her bag was placed over the living room sofa, adding a touch of warmth to the formal setting. The twins, for their part, seemed to flourish in the new environment. Liam, always the more adventurous, began crawling with renewed energy, exploring every reachable corner. Zoe, more observant, watched everything with wide, curious eyes, letting out little squeals of joy that echoed through the corridors. By evening, Marie was exhausted but deeply satisfied. The transformation was remarkable. The dust was gone, surfaces gleamed, and the air of abandonment had been replaced by one of life and possibility. Sitting on the living room floor, playing with the twins, Marie looked around, marveling at the change. The golden light of sunset streamed through the now clean windows, casting a warm glow on the furniture. The sound of the baby's laughter filled the space, bouncing off the walls and creating a true sense of home, something Marie hadn't experienced in a long time. "I think we did a good job today, my loves," she smiled, hugging Liam and Zoe. "This house needed a bit of love, didn't it?" Just then, as if in response, the twins began babbling excitedly, their little hands patting the floor in a cheerful rhythm. Marie joined them, clapping and singing a lullaby her own mother used to sing. The soft melody drifted through the mansion, filling every corner with a sense of peace and belonging. Where once there had been only silence and coldness, there was now life, warmth, and the promise of a fresh start. As night fell, Marie got the twins ready for bed, settling them on an improvised bed in the master bedroom. Looking at their peacefully sleeping faces, she felt a wave of gratitude and hope. "Good night, my little miracles," she whispered, kissing their foreheads. "Tomorrow will be another day full of possibilities." Marie lay down beside the babies, her body tired but her heart light. The mansion around them no longer felt strange or intimidating. In just one day, it had been transformed into something more: a refuge, a new beginning, and maybe, in time, a real home. As she drifted off to sleep, the soft sounds of the twins' breathing mingled with the comfortable silence of the house. Outside, the city continued its nighttime hustle, but inside the mansion, a new family was finding peace and the promise of a better future. The sun was already setting when Paul finally arrived at his mansion. He was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, after the day's tumultuous events. His once immaculate suit was now wrinkled and stained, a visual metaphor for the chaos his life had become in the last few hours. Standing before the imposing gates of his estate, Paul hesitated. Part of him wanted to turn around and run somewhere no one knew him, where he could escape the consequences of his actions. But another part, a voice he barely recognized, urged him to move forward. With a deep sigh, he entered the security code, and the gates opened silently. The path to the front door had never felt so long. Each step was heavy, weighed down by the decisions he had made. As he approached the entrance, Paul noticed something different. The curtains, which were usually closed, were open, letting the golden evening light spill out. And there was music. A soft, distant melody floated through the air, so out of place in this perpetually silent mansion that Paul almost thought he was imagining it. Heart-pounding, he inserted his key in the lock and opened the door. What he saw left him speechless. The entryway, once as cold and impersonal as a museum, was unrecognizable. The smell of cleaning supplies mixed with the pleasant aroma of home-cooked food. Colorful toys were scattered across the pristine floor, and a bright throw covered the Italian leather couch. "Hello?" Paul called out, his voice echoing oddly in a house that no longer felt like his own. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the kitchen, and suddenly there she was. The young mother from the rain, her eyes wide with surprise and fear at the sight of him. You came back," Marie stammered, instinctively taking a step back. Paul stood there, speechless, unable to form words. His gaze roamed from Marie's trembling figure to the unmistakable signs of life now filling his once sterile home. "What? How?" he began, but was cut off by the shrill cry of a baby from upstairs. Marie reacted immediately, maternal instincts overpowering her fear. I need to check on the twins," she said, already turning to go up the stairs. "Wait," Paul exclaimed, finally finding his voice. "I'll come with you." Together, they climbed the stairs in tense silence. Paul watched Marie with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. She moved with cautious confidence, as if she already knew every step and every hallway. In the master bedroom, the twins were on an improvised bed, Zoe crying while Liam watched with curious eyes. Marie picked Zoe up at once, soothing her with soft words and gentle touches. Paul hovered at the doorway, feeling like an intruder in his own home. The domestic scene before him was so warm, so full of love, that he felt a lump form in his throat. I'm sorry," Marie finally said, turning to face him with Zoe in her arms. "I know we had no right to barge into your home like this, but it was raining, and the children were cold and—" "No," Paul interrupted, his voice softer than he intended. "Don't apologize, I gave you the keys, remember? I just didn't expect—" He gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the transformation he was seeing around him. A heavy silence hung between them, broken only by Zoe's soft whimpers. "You cleaned?" Paul said finally, not knowing what else to say. Marie nodded, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "It seemed like the least I could do after your generosity." "I hope I didn't overstep." Paul shook his head, still trying to process everything. "No, it's all fine. Actually, I've never seen this place so—" He searched for the right word. "Alive." His comment seemed to ease some of the tension. Marie offered a small smile, the first since Paul's arrival. "Look," Paul began, running a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. "I know this is strange for both of us. I didn't plan to come back so soon, to be honest." Marie's face fell with worry. "We can leave right away. I just need to gather our things and—" "No," Paul said quickly, surprising them both with the intensity of his response. "I mean, it's not necessary. You can stay, at least for now." Marie looked at him warily. "Why, you don't even know me. How can you trust me in your house?" Paul let out a humorless laugh. "Trust? Honestly, I don't trust many people these days, but today I did something I never thought I'd do. I cancelled my wedding, walked away from a lifetime of expectations. All because of a moment of clarity when I saw you and your children in the rain." He paused, searching for the right words. "I can't explain it, but I feel like I need to see where this goes. Maybe it's crazy, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something right." Marie studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his for any trace of falsehood. Finally, she nodded. "All right, we'll stay for now, but the first time I feel my kids are in danger, we're leaving." "That's fair," Paul agreed. He took a tentative step into the room, looking at Liam, who was now happily playing with a small stuffed bear. "They're beautiful," he commented softly. A genuine smile lit up Marie's face. "Thank you. They're my whole world." In that moment, as if sensing the shift, Zoe stopped crying and gazed curiously at Paul. Without thinking, he reached out and gently touched the baby's cheek. "Hey there, little one," he murmured, amazed by the softness of her skin. The simple gesture seemed to seal some unspoken pact between them. The tension in the room visibly lessened, replaced by cautious hope. "Well," Paul said, stepping back slightly, "I guess we've all had a long day. How about we go downstairs and get something to eat? I'm guessing you found the kitchen." Marie laughed softly. "Yes, and I must say, your pantry is impressive." As they left the room, Paul carrying Liam in his arms and Marie holding Zoe, there was a sense that something fundamental had changed. The mansion, which for so long had been just a house, was beginning to feel like a home. Outside, the last light of day faded, giving way to a starlit night. And inside the mansion, 4 lost souls were tentatively forming the outlines of an unlikely family. The days that followed were like a strange ballet of politeness and suspicion. Paul and Marie orbited around each other carefully, like 2 planets on a collision course, but never quite meeting. Paul, used to the mansion's solitude, found himself constantly startled by the sounds of life now echoing through the halls. The babies crying in the middle of the night, the clinking of utensils in the kitchen, the soft sound of Marie humming as she cleaned. All of it was new and disconcerting. One morning, while Marie was busy bathing the twins, Paul decided to take a tour of the house. He told himself it was just to see the changes Marie had made, but a voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was looking for signs of betrayal. Entering his office, Paul immediately noticed something out of place. A drawer in his desk, normally locked, was slightly open. His heart pounded. With trembling hands, he fully opened the drawer, rifling through the papers inside. Everything seemed to be there, but he couldn't be sure if something had been read or copied. "What are you hiding, Marie?" he muttered to himself, suspicion growing in his chest. Meanwhile, Marie had made her own disturbing discovery. While cleaning a dusty shelf in the library, she accidentally knocked over a stack of documents. As she picked them up, her eyes caught words like offshore, undeclared transfers, and high-risk investments. Marie felt a chill run down her spine. Were these Paul's real dealings? She thought of the twins, sleeping peacefully upstairs. Was she putting her children in danger by staying here? The day wore on under a palpable tension. Paul and Marie avoided each other, each lost in their own thoughts and suspicions. When they did cross paths, their smiles were forced, their conversations short and superficial. It was Liam who inadvertently broke the ice. While Paul was working on his laptop in the living room, the little boy crawled over to him, clinging to his leg to stand. Paul, surprised, looked down at the baby, who now grinned and babbled happily at him. "Well, hello there, little guy," Paul said softly, a genuine smile forming on his face for the first time in days. He picked Liam up, marveling at the trust the baby placed in him. Marie, entering the room at that moment with Zoe in her arms, stopped, watching the scene with a mixture of apprehension and what might have been hope. "He likes you," she commented, her voice gentle. Paul looked at her, still smiling. "They're amazing, your children. So full of life and trust." For a moment, all suspicions were forgotten. They were just 2 people sharing the simple joy of happy children. But reality intruded quickly. Paul's phone rang, an urgent business call. He handed Liam back to Marie, his face hardening as he answered and walked out of the room. Marie, holding both babies, heard fragments of the conversation. "No, don't transfer the funds yet, and we need to be careful. If someone finds out..." Her stomach twisted in knots. What exactly was Paul up to? That night, after putting the twins to bed, Marie found Paul in the kitchen. He was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring into the darkness outside. "Thank you for dinner," he said without turning around. "You're a great cook." Marie hesitated, then decided to take the risk. "Paul, can I ask you something?" He turned, his eyes guarded. "Sure. What exactly do you do? I mean, for a living?" Paul studied her face for a long moment before answering. "I'm an investor. I make deals, move money around." "Why do you ask?" Marie took a deep breath. "It's just, I overheard some things, saw some papers. It seems complicated." Paul's expression hardened. "You've been snooping through my documents." "No," Marie protested. "It was an accident. I was cleaning and you decided to poke around in my private affairs?" Paul's voice was cold now. Marie felt fear creeping in. "I just want to be sure my kids are safe here. If you're involved in anything illegal..." Paul gave a humorless laugh. "Illegal? Is that how you thank me for taking you off the streets, by accusing me of crimes?" The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken accusations and unexpressed fears. It was the distant cry of Zoe that finally broke the impasse. Marie turned to go to her, but Paul stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Wait," he said, his voice softer now. I'm sorry. You're right to ask questions. You barely know me, after all." Marie nodded, still tense. "And you barely know me? How do you know I'm not here to rob you or something?" Paul let out a short laugh. I guess we're both a little paranoid, huh? A slight smile appeared on Marie's face. Maybe just a bit. At that moment, Zoe's crying grew louder, followed by Liam's. "Come on," Paul said, surprising Marie. "I'll help you with them." As they climbed the stairs together, Paul spoke again. "Look, my business is complicated. Yes, it's not always conventional. But I swear I'm not involved in anything illegal. What about you? Anything I should know?" Marie shook her head. "I'm just a mother trying to give my kids a better life. That's all." When they reached the bedroom, they found the twins standing in their makeshift crib, their little arms raised, asking to be held. Without hesitation, Paul picked up Liam while Marie scooped up Zoe. As they soothed the babies together, exchanging glances over the little ones' sleepy heads, something shifted subtly between them. The suspicions hadn't completely vanished, but there was now a mutual understanding, a common ground discovered in caring for those tiny lives. "Tomorrow," Paul said softly, placing Liam back in the crib, "we can talk more, be more open with each other. What do you think?" Marie nodded, a tired but genuine smile on her face. "I'd like that." As they left the bedroom, leaving the twins to sleep, both sensed that, despite the suspicions and troubling discoveries, something new and potentially wonderful was beginning to blossom in that house. The piercing sound of the doorbell cut through the morning's tranquility like a knife. Paulus, who was in the kitchen preparing breakfast with Marie and the twins, froze. Their eyes met, and Marie immediately took the babies and headed upstairs, following the plan they'd set for unexpected situations, heart pounding. Paul walked to the front door. He knew this moment would come, but he hadn't expected it so soon. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. Anne stood there, impeccably dressed in a white skirt suit, her eyes sparkling with barely contained anger. "Hello, Paul," she said, her voice cold as ice. "I thought I'd pay a visit since you didn't bother to give me any explanation after the fiasco at the altar." Before Paul could reply, Anne gently pushed past him and entered the house. Her eyes swept over the subtle changes. Toys scattered around, a bright throw on the sofa, the smell of homemade food in the air. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising an octave. You have someone else here." Paul swallowed hard, feeling cornered. "Anne, I can explain. Things aren't what they seem." "Oh, really?" Anne retorted, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "Then explain to me, Paul. Explain why you left me at the altar and now seem to be living some sort of domestic fantasy." At that moment, a baby's cry echoed through the house. Anne's face went pale, and she turned to Paul with a look of shock and betrayal. "You have a child," she whispered, incredulous. "Is that why you cancelled the wedding? You have a secret family." "No," Paul exclaimed, raising his hands defensively. "Anne, it's nothing like that. Let me explain." But before he could continue, Marie appeared at the top of the stairs carrying Zoe, who was still fussing. Liam clung to her leg, curiously watching the scene below. The silence that followed was deafening. Anne's gaze darted between Paul and Marie, her expression a mask of shock and disgust. You, she stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Paul took a step forward and trying to ease the tension. "Anne, please listen. This isn't what you're thinking. I met Marie and the twins on the wedding day. They were out in the rain." "Oh, spare me that absurd story," Anne exploded, regaining her voice. "You expect me to believe you just picked up a homeless woman and her kids on our wedding day? What kind of fool do you take me for?" Marie, who had slowly descended the stairs, positioned herself beside Paul. Her posture was calm, but her eyes shone with a mixture of fear and resolve. "Mom," Marie said quietly, "I know this seems insane, but Paul is telling the truth. He saved us. We had nowhere to go, and he offered us shelter." Anne laughed bitterly. "Oh, how noble of him. And I suppose offering shelter included destroying our wedding and ruining my reputation." Paul tried to step in again, but Anne cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No, Paul, you have no idea what you've done. Do you know how many calls I got, how many pitying looks I had to endure, and now this?" She pointed at Marie and the twins. "This is unbelievable." She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying over the screen. "Well, if you want to play dirty, two can play at that game. Let's see what the press thinks when they find out the great Paul left his fiancée for A homeless single mother, Marie finished, her voice surprisingly steady. She took a step forward, looking Anne directly in the eye. Ma'am, I understand your anger. Before you do something you'll regret, I'd like you to hear me. Anne, caught off guard by Marie's boldness, lowered her phone, her eyes fixed on the young mother. Marie took a deep breath and began. Year ago, I had a normal life, job, an apartment, dreams for the future. Then I met a man who seemed He was charming, attentive, until he wasn't. When I found out I was pregnant, he showed his true colors. Abusive, controlling. I ran away to protect my kids, even if it meant living on the streets. She paused, looking down at the twins with love. On the day of your wedding, we were at our lowest point, cold, hungry, with no hope left. And then Paul appeared. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me or my children anything. But he gave us a chance to survive, to start over. Anne listened silently, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. Marie continued, I know Paul may seem like the villain in your story, but to me and my children, he's a hero. A man who risked everything to help strangers in need. That doesn't erase your pain, I know. But maybe it can help you understand that sometimes people make hard choices for reasons beyond what we can see at first glance. A weighty silence fell. Anne looked from Marie to Paul, her initial fury replaced by visible confusion. Paul finally spoke, his voice low and sincere. Anne, I'm sorry I hurt you. I never meant to. For that day, I realized I'd been living a life that wasn't really mine. Helping Marie and the twins, that was the first genuine thing I've done in years. Anne closed her eyes for a moment, as though waging an internal battle. When she opened them again, there was a mixture of resignation and a hint of reluctant understanding. This is crazy, she said at last. Absolutely insane. But she looked at Marie and the twins, then back at Paul. Maybe it's the most selfless thing you've ever done, Paul. She put her phone back in her purse, her shoulders dropping slightly. I'm not going to expose this. Not for you, Paul, but for these children. They don't deserve to be dragged into a scandal. With one last glance at the unlikely group before her, Anne turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back. Paul, I hope you know what you're doing. And you, she said, addressing Marie, take good care of him. He can be a jerk sometimes, but he has a good heart. With that, she was gone, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Paul and Marie exchanged looks of relief and disbelief. Liam, oblivious to the adult's tension, let out a happy giggle, breaking the moment. Marie picked him up, a weary but genuine smile on her face. Well, she said, looking at Paul, I guess we survived our first storm together. Paul nodded, a tentative grin appearing on his lips. Yeah, I guess we did. And you know what? I have a feeling it won't be our last. As they returned to the kitchen, the twins babbling gleefully, there was a palpable sense that something had shifted. Anne's unexpected visit, tense as it was, had somehow solidified the strange bond between Paul and Marie. The future was still uncertain, but at that moment, in the sunlit kitchen filled with the laughter of children, it seemed full of promise. Anne's turbulent visit left both Paul and Marie shaken, but it also opened an unexpected door between them. That night, after putting the twins to bed, they found themselves on the mansion's veranda, each holding a cup of hot tea as the quiet of the night enveloped them like a blanket. Paul was the first to break the silence. Thank you, he said softly, for standing up for me today. You didn't have to do that. Marie shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. It felt like the right thing to do. Besides, we're in this mess together, aren't we? Paul nodded, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. I think it's time we were honest with each other, really honest. Marie turned to face him, her expression serious. I agree. Where do we start? Paul took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep waters. I was born into a wealthy family, he began. Ever since I was a kid, all I heard was about success, money, and status. My parents were absent, at best. I grew up with nannies and in fancy boarding schools. He paused, taking a sip of his tea. I learned early on that what mattered was financial success. Emotions, real connections, those were for the weak. So I did exactly what was expected of me. Studied at the best schools, built a business empire, got engaged to the right woman. Marie listened intently, her eyes filled with empathy. Paul continued, "But you know what's ironic? The more success I achieved, the emptier I felt. This mansion, it's more of a prison than a home. I never knew what it was like to truly belong somewhere." He turned to Marie, his eyes reflecting a vulnerability she had never seen before. "When I saw you and the twins that day, something inside me broke, or maybe it was fixed. For the first time, I acted without thinking about the consequences, without calculating the gains. And it was liberating." Marie reached out, gently touching Paul's arm. "I understand more than you think," she said softly. Now it was Marie's turn to share her story. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I come from a middle-class family," she began. "We never had much, but we always had enough. I always dreamed of becoming a teacher, helping children. I was in my last year of college when I met David." Her voice trembled slightly at the name. "He was charming, attentive, made me feel special. At first, everything was perfect. But then, things changed." Paul listened silently as Marie described how the relationship turned abusive, how David isolated her from friends and family, and how he tried to control every aspect of her life. "When I found out I was pregnant with twins, I thought it would make things better," Marie continued. Tears she refused to shed glistening in her eyes, but it got worse. "David was furious, accused me of ruining his plans. That's when I knew I had to leave." She looked at Paul, her face a mix of pain and determination. "I ran away in the middle of the night with just the clothes on my back and some money I'd managed to hide. I spent months going from shelter to shelter, always afraid David would find me." Paul felt a surge of anger toward the man he had never met, but who had caused Marie and her children so much suffering. Marie continued, "The twins were born in a women's shelter. They were premature, so tiny and fragile. I promised them I would do anything to keep them safe and give them a better life." She gave a sad smile. "But it's tough, you know, finding work, a place to live. It all becomes nearly impossible when you're alone with 2 babies and no support. We ended up on the streets, and that's when you found us." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Paul and Marie looked at each other, seeing one another in a new light. "It's amazing," Paul said at last, "how 2 people from such different worlds can end up in the same place." Marie nodded, "Both trapped, in a way. You in a gilded cage, me in one of circumstances. And both searching for something more," Paul added softly. In that moment, something changed between them. The barriers they had maintained, the suspicions and fears, began to crumble. "You know," Marie said, a genuine smile lighting up her face, "when you gave me those keys to this mansion, I thought you were crazy or that there was some catch. But now I understand. You were looking for an escape as much as I was." Paul chuckled quietly. "I guess so. I never thought helping a stranger in the rain would lead me to question my entire life. And I never imagined that accepting help from a stranger would give me hope again," Marie replied. They fell silent for a moment, letting the weight of what they'd shared settle. The air between them felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. "What happens now?" Marie finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Paul looked at her, his eyes filled with a newfound determination. "I'm not sure exactly, but I know I don't want to go back to the life I had before. This house, for the first time, it feels like it could be a real home." Marie smiled, tears of relief and gratitude brightening her eyes. "For us, too. The twins, they've never been so happy and safe." Paul held out his hand, hesitant at first, and Marie took it without hesitation. "So how about we figure this out together?" he proposed. "See where this goes, like a family." The word hung between them, full of promise and possibility. Marie squeezed Paul's hand, a radiant smile on her face. "I like that idea. A family." In that moment, as if sealing the agreement, one of the twins began to cry softly in the distance. Paul and Marie looked at each other and laughed. "I think that's my cue," Marie said, getting up. "Mind if I come with you?" Paul asked, surprising even himself. Marie nodded. a warmth spreading through her chest. Of course. Let's go. As they walked together to care for the twins, there was a palpable sense that something new and precious was unfolding. Two lonely souls, brought together by unlikely circumstances, had found each other and were rediscovering the meaning of home and family. The mansion, once cold and impersonal, now seemed to warm with the promise of a new beginning, echoing with the gentle sounds of a family in the making. The day dawned with a deceptive calm. Marie was in the kitchen, making breakfast for the twins, while Paul worked on his laptop at the dining table. It was a domestic scene that had become familiar over the past few weeks, a comfortable routine they were both starting to cherish. The gentle background noise of the TV was suddenly interrupted by a local news report that made Marie freeze. A man wanted for domestic violence has been spotted in the area. Authorities asked that any information regarding David Thompson be reported immediately. The spoon Marie was holding clattered to the floor with a metallic echo. Paul looked up, alarmed by the sudden change in her demeanor. "Marie, what's wrong?" he asked, standing quickly. Marie was pale, her eyes fixed on the TV screen displaying David's photo. He's here," she whispered, terror evident in her voice. Paul approached her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "David, your ex." Marie nodded, unable to speak. The memories she had fought so hard to suppress surged back like a tidal wave. Fear, pain, nights of terror, all in a single instant. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Paul acted swiftly. He grabbed his phone and made a series of quick calls, his voice low and urgent. "Don't worry," he said to Marie after hanging up. "I have contacts in the local police. They'll increase patrols in the area and keep a close watch. I've also hired private security to monitor the property." Marie looked at him, gratitude and fear mingling in her eyes. "Thank you, Paul. But what if it's not enough? You don't know David. He's ruthless." Paul knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Marie, look at me. I won't let anything happen to you or the twins. I promise." At that moment, the baby's cries echoed through the baby monitor. Marie got up automatically, her maternal instincts overriding her fear for the time being. "I'll come with you," Paul said, following her to the twins' room. As they soothed the babies together, Paul couldn't help noticing how Marie held them even closer, as though afraid they might disappear at any moment. The following days were marked by palpable tension in the mansion. Marie remained constantly vigilant, jumping at every unexpected sound. Paul split his time between finalizing security measures and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for Marie and the children. One evening, after the twins were asleep, Paul found Marie on the veranda, staring into the darkness beyond the estate's gates. "I can't keep living like this," she said softly when Paul joined her. "Always looking over my shoulder, always afraid." Paul nodded in understanding. "What do you want to do?" Marie took a deep breath, a resolve forming in her eyes. "I need to face him. I can't let him keep controlling my life, even from a distance." Paul looked at her with a mix of admiration and worry. "Are you sure? You don't have to do it alone, you know." "I know," Marie said, giving him a small, earnest smile, "and that's why I know I can do it, because I'm not alone anymore." Over the next few days, Marie worked with a therapist Paul recommended, preparing herself emotionally for a potential confrontation. She also began taking self-defense lessons, determined never to feel powerless again. Paul, impressed by Marie's strength and resilience, found himself questioning his own life choices. As he worked to protect his new family, he couldn't avoid reflecting on some of his past business dealings. One night, after tucking the twins in, Paul found Marie in the library. He seemed unsettled, fidgeting distractedly with some papers on his desk. "What's wrong?" Marie asked, noticing his restlessness. Paul hesitated before answering. "I've been thinking about my businesses, about the choices I've made to get where I am." Marie motioned for him to continue. "I always prided myself on operating within the law, but there's a fine line between what's legal and what's ethical," Paul went on. "Some of my investments, some of the companies I've partnered with, I'm not sure I can look in the mirror and say I did the right thing." Marie watched him for a moment before speaking. "The fact that you're questioning it now, that means something, Paul. It means you're growing, changing." Paul looked at her, gratitude in his eyes. "I want to be better. For you, for the twins, for myself." Before Marie could respond, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the mansion. They both froze, fear evident in their eyes. "The babies," Marie whispered, already moving toward the door. Paul followed, his heart pounding. They ran to the children's room, finding it empty. Panic began to set in when they heard voices downstairs. Quietly descending the stairs, they found a scene that made Marie's blood run cold. David was in the living room, holding Liam while Zoe sobbed on the floor beside him. "I finally found you, sweetheart," David said, his voice low and menacing. Marie took a step forward, months of fear and repressed anger exploding to the surface. "Put my son down, David," she demanded, her voice surprisingly firm. David laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Or what? You're going to stop me." That's when Paul intervened, his commanding presence filling the room. "No, but I will," he said, his voice carrying a veiled threat. What followed was a tense standoff. Marie, tapping into a courage she hadn't known she possessed, confronted David verbally, calling out his lies and manipulations. Paul used his influence to ensure the police arrived quickly. As sirens blared in the distance, David realized he was cornered. In one last act of desperation, he tried to escape, but was swiftly intercepted by Paul and the arriving security team. While David was taken away by the police, Marie clutched the twins, tears of relief streaming down her face. Paul stood behind her, wrapping his arms around his newly formed family in a protective embrace. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe now." Marie looked up at Paul, her eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. "Thank you for standing by me." Paul smiled gently. "Always." That night, as the adrenaline wore off and the reality of what they had faced set in, Paul and Marie sat on the veranda, the twins sleeping peacefully inside. "You know," Paul said, breaking the comfortable silence, "seeing you stand up to David, watching you find your strength, it made me realize I need to face my own demons too." Marie looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Paul took a deep breath. "Tomorrow I'm going to start reviewing all my business dealings. Anything that isn't completely ethical, I'm going to undo. I want to build something we can be proud of, something we can pass on to Liam and Zoe without shame." Marie smiled, taking Paul's hand. "I'm proud of you, and I'll be by your side every step of the way." As they gazed up at the stars, there was a sense that, despite the challenges they had faced and those still to come, they were stronger together. The shadows of the past, though still present, no longer seemed so daunting in the light of their shared future. The day dawned with a palpable tension in the air. Marie woke with a start, her heart pounding from a nightmare she couldn't fully recall. Beside her, Paul still slept soundly. She watched him for a moment, grateful for his comforting presence, before rising quietly to check on the twins. Liam and Zoe slept peacefully in their cribs, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions their mother faced. Marie watched them, feeling a surge of love and protectiveness so intense it almost hurt. She vowed, not for the first time, that she would do anything to keep them safe. The rest of the morning passed in an uneasy normality. Paul left early for an important meeting, promising to return as soon as he could. Marie busied herself with household tasks and caring for the twins, trying to keep the dark thoughts at bay. It was early afternoon, while Marie hummed softly to the babies in the living room, that the shatter of glass echoed through the mansion. She froze, her blood turning to ice. Quickly and quietly, she set the twins in their playpen and grabbed her phone, dialing the emergency number Paul had programmed. Before she could complete the call, a familiar, terrifying voice sounded behind her. "Hello, Marie. Miss me?" She turned slowly, facing the man who had haunted her nightmares for so long. David stood in the doorway, his cold eyes sweeping the luxurious surroundings before locking onto her. "How did you find me?" Marie asked, her voice shaking, but determined not to show weakness. David laughed, devoid of any humor. "You really thought you could hide from me, especially in a mansion like this?" He took a step forward, making Marie instinctively back away. "Question is, sweetheart, who did you have to sleep with to get all of this?" The cruel insinuation ignited a spark of anger in Marie. The months of therapy, of rebuilding her self-esteem, of feeling safe and valued, all led to this moment. "It's none of your business, David," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "My life is no longer your concern." David seemed momentarily surprised by her firm response, but his face quickly twisted into a mask of rage. "You're my wife. Those are my kids. I was never your wife," Marie snapped, taking a step forward. "And those kids, they're mine. You gave them up the moment you found out I was pregnant." The tension in the room was suffocating. The twins, sensing danger, began to whimper. Their soft cries seemed to enrage David even more. "Shut them up," he shouted, lunging toward the playpen. Marie moved with a speed she didn't know she possessed, placing herself between David and the children. "Don't you dare go near them," she hissed, all pretense of fear gone in the face of the threat to her babies. David hesitated, thrown off by Marie's ferocity. "You've changed," he said, a note of confusion in his voice. "Yes, I have," Marie responded, standing her ground. "I'm not that frightened woman you used to control. I have a life now, David, a good one, with people who value and respect me." And as she spoke, Marie realized every word was true. She had changed. The fragile, terrified woman who fled into the night months ago no longer existed. In her place stood someone strong, determined, and, for the first time in a long time, truly free. Realizing he was losing control, David tried a different tactic. His features softened into a mask of regret Marie knew all too well. "Marie, baby," he began, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Come back to me. We can be a family." In the past, these words would have made Marie falter, doubt herself. But now, she saw right through them, recognizing the manipulation beneath the false sincerity. "No, David," she said firmly. "There is no us and there's no going back. The only family I have is here." She gestured toward the twins and the people I've chosen to be in my life. David's mask slipped, revealing the underlying fury. He lunged forward, grabbing Marie's arm roughly. "You don't have a choice," he snarled. "You're mine." At that moment, Paul walked into the room, having returned early from his meeting. He assessed the situation in an instant, his eyes narrowing when he saw David gripping Marie's arm. "Get your hands off her," Paul ordered, his voice low and menacing. David turned and, surprised by the interruption, his hold on Marie's arm loosened just enough for her to pull away. "So this is your new toy," David sneered, eyeing Marie and then Paul. "A rich guy who pities you." Before Paul could reply, Marie stepped forward. "Paul is not my toy, David. He's a good man who treats me with respect and kindness, something you never did." Paul watched Marie with a mix of pride and admiration. He wanted to step in to protect her, but he knew this was her moment. She needed to face her past on her own. David, seeing he was losing control again, lunged for the twins. That was his fatal mistake. With a strength that surprised everyone, including herself, Marie shoved David away from the playpen. "I told you not to go near them." At that moment, sirens blared outside, drawing closer by the second. Paul had quietly alerted security the moment he entered the room. Realizing he was cornered, David made one last desperate attempt to regain control. He lunged at Marie, but Paul was quicker, intercepting him and forcing him to the floor. "It's over, David," Paul said, his voice icy. "The police are here and you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Minutes later, the mansion was filled with officers. David was taken away in handcuffs, shouting empty threats as he was shoved into the patrol car. Marie, trembling with adrenaline, scooped the twins into her arms, hugging them tightly. Paul moved in, wrapping his arms around all three of them in a protective circle. "You were amazing," he whispered in Marie's ear. "So strong, so brave." Marie looked at him, tears of relief and exhaustion filling her eyes. "Thank you for being here, for giving me the chance to be strong." While they gave their statements to the police and took legal steps to ensure Marie and the twins' continued safety, there was a tangible feeling that a dark chapter had finally closed. Later that night, with the twins sound asleep and the house peaceful once more, Marie and Paul sat on the veranda, gazing at the stars. "You know," Marie said softly, "for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I can really breathe. like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Paul took her hand gently, giving it a light squeeze. You freed yourself today, Marie. And you showed everyone, especially yourself, how strong you really are. Marie smiled, a calm she hadn't felt in years washing over her. The future, once so terrifying and uncertain, now seemed bright with possibilities. With Paul at her side and the twins safe, she knew she could face whatever came next. The confrontation with David was not just the end of a nightmare, it was the beginning of a new life, one Marie had fought for with her own courage and strength. Dawn brought more than a new day, it brought the start of a new era for the mansion and everyone within it. Paul woke early, his mind buzzing with ideas that had taken shape overnight. He found Marie in the kitchen, making breakfast for the twins. "Good morning," he said, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "I had an idea." Marie smiled, intrigued by Paul's energy. "What kind of idea?" Paul took a deep breath before beginning. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened, how our lives have changed, and I realized we have a unique opportunity here." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "This mansion, it's way too big for just us, and there are so many families out there going through tough situations, like you did. What if we could help them?" Marie looked at him, understanding dawning on her face. "You want to turn the mansion into a shelter?" Paul nodded, excited. "Not just a shelter, but a support center, a place where families in vulnerable situations can stay temporarily, get guidance, and rebuild. What do you think?" Marie was silent for a moment, letting the idea sink in. Then a wide smile lit her face. "Paul, that's incredible. It's perfect." In the days that followed, the mansion became a construction zone. Paul used his contacts and resources to make the necessary renovations, converting entire wings into comfortable apartments and communal spaces. Marie, for her part, threw herself into the project wholeheartedly. Her personal experience became an invaluable tool in shaping the support programs. She worked tirelessly, developing workshops on financial independence, childcare, and rebuilding self-esteem. "I want them to feel what I felt when I arrived here," Marie explained to Paul one evening as they reviewed the plans. "That sense of hope, of a fresh start." Paul watched her in admiration. "You're amazing, you know that. The way you've turned your pain into something so positive." Marie blushed slightly, still unaccustomed to compliments. "We're doing this together, Paul. Your vision, your resources. We're building something really special here." As the project took shape, Paul and Marie found themselves working side by side, complementing each other's strengths in ways they never imagined. Paul brought his experience in business and administration, while Marie offered empathy and deep understanding of the needs of the families they aimed to help. The first family arrived on a rainy afternoon, reminiscent of the day Marie and the twins had found shelter there. It was a young mother with 2 small children, escaping an abusive situation. Marie greeted them personally, her eyes shining with compassion and understanding. "Welcome to your new temporary home," she said softly, guiding them inside. "You're safe here." In the weeks that followed, more families arrived. The mansion, once silent and cold, now pulsed with life. Children's laughter echoed in the corridors, and the aroma of shared meals filled the air. Paul observed it all with a mixture of pride and awe. He saw how Marie thrived in her new role, guiding the families with a perfect blend of strength and kindness. He was amazed to discover a fulfillment he had never experienced during his many years of business success. One night, as they strolled through the mansion's gardens after a long day of work, Paul took Marie's hand. "You know," he said softly, "I never imagined my life would take this turn, but now I can't picture doing anything else." Marie smiled, squeezing his hand. "It's amazing how much everything has changed, isn't it? Just a few months ago, I was on the streets with no hope left, and now you're changing lives," Paul finished. "We're changing lives." They stopped, looking back at the brightly lit mansion. Through the windows, they could see families talking and laughing. The sight warmed their hearts. "We make a good team, you and I," Marie said, turning to Paul. He gazed into her eyes, feeling a rush of emotion he still couldn't fully name. Yes, we do, he replied softly. In that moment, with the distant sound of children's laughter and the scent of jasmine in the air, they both felt they had found something they hadn't even known they were searching for. It wasn't just a purpose, it was a partnership, a connection that surpassed anything they had experienced before. Returning to the mansion, they were greeted by Liam and Zoe, now older and bursting with energy. The twins ran to them, their laughter mingling with that of the other children who now called this place home. As Paul scooped Liam into his arms and Marie hugged Zoe, they exchanged a look of mutual understanding. What began as an impulsive act of kindness on a rainy day had grown into something far greater than they had ever anticipated. The mansion, once a symbol of isolated wealth, now hummed with hope and renewal, and at its heart was an unlikely family, brought together not by blood but by choice and a shared purpose. As the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the estate, Paul and Marie knew they had found not just a new beginning for themselves, but a way to offer new beginnings to others. In that realization, they found a joy and fulfillment no amount of material wealth could ever provide. Autumn painted the mansion's gardens in shades of gold and red, mirroring the warm transformation that had taken place within its walls. What was once a cold, lonely space now thrived with life, laughter, and purpose. Marie stood on the veranda, watching as Liam and Zoe, now nearly 2 years old, ran across the lawn, their laughter mixing with that of other children who had found refuge in the estate. The twins had blossomed over the past months, their distinct personalities shining through more each day. Liam, with his dark curls and curious eyes, was the adventurer, always ready to explore every corner of the sprawling garden. Zoe, on the other hand, with lighter hair and a gentle smile, was the peacemaker, often mediating small disputes with a wisdom far beyond her years. "Hey, Penny, for your thoughts." Paul's voice gently broke into Marie's reflections as he joined her on the veranda, handing her a cup of hot tea. Marie smiled, accepting the drink. "I was just thinking about how much everything has changed. Look at them, Paul. They're so happy, so safe." Paul nodded, his eyes following the twins with open affection. "They're not the only ones who've changed," he said softly, turning his gaze to Marie. She blushed slightly under his gaze, feeling a familiar warmth spread through her chest. In the past few months, as they worked side by side to turn the mansion into a refuge for families in need, something had shifted between them. Casual touches that felt electric, glances that lasted a moment too long, smiles shared that conveyed more than words ever could. "Paul, Marie began, but was interrupted by a joyful shout from Zoe, who ran toward them with her arms outstretched. "Mommy, Daddy," she exclaimed, unaware of the impact of her words. Paul and Marie exchanged surprised glances. It was the first time the children had referred to Paul as Daddy. The moment was broken only by Liam, who arrived right behind his sister, echoing the same word. Paul crouched down, opening his arms to them. "Hey, you two," he said, emotion thick in his voice. "Did you have fun?" As the children babbled excitedly about their garden adventures, Marie watched with conflicting emotions swirling in her heart. Joy at the bond between Paul and the twins, fear of what it might mean, and a growing certainty of her own feelings for him. Later that evening, after putting the children to bed, Paul and Marie met in the library, a place that had become their personal haven. "About what happened today," Paul began, hesitant. "The kids calling you Dad?" Marie asked, taking a deep breath. Paul nodded. I don't want to overstep, Marie. If it bothers you, I can talk to them." Marie shook her head, a soft smile on her lips. "It doesn't bother me, Paul. Actually, I think it's wonderful that they feel that way about you." A loaded silence followed, brimming with unspoken words and unexpressed feelings. "Marie," Paul finally said, his voice quiet but intense, "I think we need to talk about us." Marie felt her heart flutter. "Us." Paul took a step closer. "Yes, us. Whatever's happening between us, because something is happening, isn't it?" Marie closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage. When she opened them again, she saw Paul watching her with hope and apprehension. "Yes," she whispered, "something is happening." Paul exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I have feelings for you, Marie, feelings that go beyond friendship or a work partnership. Tears pricked at Marie's eyes. I do too, Paul. But you're scared, Paul finished gently. I am too. Marie nodded, relieved at his understanding. My last relationship, well, you know how it ended. The idea of opening up again, of trusting. Paul took her hands in his. I understand. My life before you and the kids was so empty, so focused on success and money. The thought of a real relationship, based on love and trust, it's scary and wonderful at the same time. Marie smiled through her tears. That's exactly how I feel. They stood in silence for a moment, just absorbing each other's presence and the significance of what they were admitting. What if, Paul began hesitantly, what if we take it slow? One day at a time. Marie felt a weight lift from her shoulders. I like that idea. No pressure, no huge expectations. Just us. Paul grinned, that smile that made Marie's heart skip a beat. Just us, he agreed. Slowly, almost shyly, Paul leaned in, and his lips met Marie's in a gentle, tender kiss. It was a kiss filled with promise, a possibility, and a future they never dreamed was within reach, but now seemed undeniably close. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling, a mixture of joy and nerves in their eyes. So, Marie asked softly, what do we do now? Paul chuckled. Honestly, I have no idea, but I'm excited to figure it out. With you? Marie nodded, feeling a surge of happiness. With me, she echoed. As they left the library hand in hand, the mansion around them hummed with a new energy. What began as a charitable impulse had become a family, a purpose, and now, the start of a deep, genuine love. Outside, autumn leaves danced on the breeze, symbolizing change and renewal. And inside the mansion, two hearts, once lonely and hurt, beat in perfect harmony, promising a future full of love, hope, and infinite possibilities. The spring sun bathed the mansion in golden light, as though nature itself was celebrating the special day. A year had passed since Paul and Marie confessed their feelings for each other, and the transformation during that time was nearly as impressive as the mansion's initial overhaul. What began as an improvised refuge for families in need had grown into a nationally recognized support center. The New Beginnings Foundation, as it was called, now offered not only temporary housing, but also professional training programs, psychological counseling, and legal assistance to its residents. At the heart of this transformation were Paul and Marie, whose partnership had blossomed into a deep and lasting love. And today, they were about to formalize that union in a way neither could have imagined just 2 years prior. Marie stood before the mirror, adjusting her simple yet elegant white dress. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped a delicate necklace, a gift from Paul. Beside her, Zoe, now almost 3 years old, twirled in her flower girl dress, tossing flower petals around the room. "Mommy is so pretty," Zoe exclaimed, pausing her dance to hug Marie's leg. Marie smiled, bending down to hug her daughter. "Thank you, my love. You look stunning too." A soft knock on the door announced an unexpected visitor. Marie turned, surprised to see Anne standing in the doorway with a hesitant smile on her face. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Anne said gently. Marie shook her head, inviting her in. "Not at all. It's good to see you, Anne." The two women regarded each other for a moment, the past and present intertwining in unexpected ways. "You look beautiful," Anne offered sincerely. "Paul is a lucky man," Marie smiled. "We're both lucky, and grateful for everything that happened to bring us here." Anne nodded, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "I wanted to apologize for how I acted before, and to say that I really admire what you two have built here. It's truly inspiring." Marie took Anne's hands in hers. "Thank you. It means a lot to hear you say that, and know that you're always welcome here." The two shared a brief but meaningful hug, sealing a reconciliation neither had expected, but both deeply appreciated. Outside, in the meticulously decorated garden, Paul waited anxiously. Liam by his side as a proud little ring-bearer. The guests, a mix of families who had come through the foundation, new friends made along the way, and some familiar faces from Paul's past, chatted excitedly, creating an atmosphere of joy and anticipation. As the soft music began to play, everyone turned to see Zoe walking down the improvised aisle, enthusiastically scattering flower petals. Right behind her came Marie, radiant in her understated elegance. Paul felt his heart skip a beat at the sight of her. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the entire journey, from that rainy day to this sunny one, made perfect sense. The ceremony was brief, yet moving. Paul and Marie exchanged vows that spoke not just of love, but of partnership, respect, and a shared commitment to making a difference in the world. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers and shouts from the guests echoed the overflowing joy in the couple's hearts. The reception that followed was a celebration not just of Paul and Marie's love, but of the spirit of community and hope they had fostered. Families who had benefited from the foundation shared stories of overcoming hardship and expressed gratitude. Children ran and played in the gardens, their laughter a living testament to the power of a single act of kindness. In a quiet moment during the festivities, Paul and Marie stepped aside, watching the scene unfold before them. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here?" Marie asked, her head resting on Paul's shoulder. Paul smiled, pulling her closer. "Not in my wildest dreams, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." They looked on as Liam and Zoe played with the other children, their faces lit with joy. "They're amazing, aren't they?" Paul remarked, his chest swelling with paternal pride. Marie nodded. "They are. And to think there was a time I was terrified about their future." Paul pressed a gentle kiss to Marie's forehead. "Now their future is full of possibilities, and so is ours." At that moment, Anne approached the couple, holding an envelope. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to give you this personally," she said, extending the envelope toward them. Paul opened it, his eyes widening at the contents. "Anne, this is a donation to the foundation," Anne finished with a smile. "Consider it my contribution to ensure more families can have a fresh start." Marie hugged Anne impulsively, tears of gratitude welling up. "Thank you. It means so much." As Anne walked away to join the other guests, Paul and Marie exchanged a look of mutual admiration. The path that brought them here was unexpected and often challenging, but each step had led them exactly where they needed to be. The afternoon wore on, the sun dipping low in the sky and casting a golden glow over the estate. Paul and Marie gathered everyone for a group photo, a snapshot that perfectly captured the essence of what they had created. A united community, filled with hope and endless possibilities. As the final notes of music drifted into the night and the guests began to leave, Paul and Marie remained hand in hand watching the scene. Liam and Zoe, tired but content, dozed in the arms of caring volunteers from the foundation. "So," Paul said softly, turning to his wife, "ready for the next chapter?" Marie smiled, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "With you? Always." And so, under a starry sky with the illuminated mansion behind them, no longer a symbol of isolation but a beacon of hope, Paul and Marie sealed their commitment with a kiss. It was more than just a fairy tale ending. It was the start of an ongoing journey of love and purpose, promising countless fresh beginnings, not only for them, but for all those whose lives they would touch along the way.